Okay, in this video we're going to talk about deadweight loss and tax incidence. Okay, so just a reminder, so we have our supply and demand, we labeled our equilibrium quantity, equilibrium price, and then let's suppose we put a tax on this market. So this is the unit tax T, and then we can have our new decision line. We could also do this by doing it with the demand curve, but it doesn't make any difference which one we do. And so with this tax, we end up, first of all, we end up producing a lower quantity, and the buyers end up paying more than they did before. So let's call this, we'll call this PB. This is the price the buyers pay. And the sellers end up receiving less than they did before. We'll call that P seller. And the distance between these two is the tax per unit. Okay, so this is our situation. Now to get ready for this problem, let's go ahead and label all these little areas. So let's call this A, B, C, D. Okay, so we're going to use this to kind of go through who gets each part of this. Okay, so let's first start by making a little table. And so we're going to have consumer surplus, producer surplus, tax revenue, economic surplus, and then finally we'll see if we have any deadweight loss. And so we can start it with no tax. So when we have no tax, where was the consumer surplus? Okay, so we can, so remember, let's do this lightly in yellow. It's above the price, so they're paying P star, and below the demand curve. Okay, so this would have been, this yellow part up here would have been the producer surplus. So it would have, I mean consumer surplus, sorry. It would have been A plus B plus C. Okay, and then the producer surplus is going to be below the price they received, which was P star, and above their supply curve. So again, also outlined in yellow. In the bottom half, it would have been this D plus E plus F. Okay, and there was no tax, and this whole thing is the economic surplus, A plus B, sorry, it's a little tedious, plus C plus D plus E plus F. Okay, and there's no deadweight loss, because deadweight loss is about getting less than you can at the market equilibrium, and of course this is the market equilibrium, or at the efficient market equilibrium. So now we're going to put our tax in. So now we're considering this QT and then this wedge of the tax between these two prices, the price for the buyer and the price for the seller. Okay, so now things have changed a little bit. So now our buyer pays PB, and so this green triangle is all they get, just A. And our seller receives PS, and so this little green triangle down here is all they get. But we also have some tax revenue. So tax revenue is this part in the middle. So the tax is here. The tax is this part of T tall, and they sell this many units. So this box here shows the tax revenue. So remember the tax revenue is equal to the tax, which is the height, times QT, the amount they sell. And so this is going to be B plus D. So now we can put our economic surplus together. So it's this, the A plus B, which is now tax revenue, plus D, which is now tax revenue, plus F. So notice, you can notice something here. B came from the seller. Okay, this is from the seller. Sorry, B is from the buyer. Before it was consumer surplus, and now it is tax revenue. And the reason I say it's coming from them is because they're paying a higher price in order for this to happen. And D is from the seller. All right, so we can, we just ignore that. So this PB is greater than P star, that's where B comes from. And D is, well, PS is less than P star, so that's where that one comes from. Okay, so we get this idea. Now something's missing here. Okay, so what's missing? And the missing part is C plus E. and those are deadweight loss. And the reason they are deadweight loss is because no one gets them. Okay, so let's fix something we haven't used here. I can just use this purple. So this part here, C and E, this is deadweight loss. And so the reason those deadweight loss is because, again, in this case, no one got them because they just weren't produced. The quantity, the production went down because of the tax, and those units weren't produced. So even though the marginal benefit, and we got marginal cost, so even though the marginal benefit was greater than marginal cost, they still weren't produced, and therefore they didn't happen. So let's summarize the things that we've said here. Okay, so let's summarize them below about the effects of a tax. Okay, so first of all, both the buyers and the sellers are hurt by the tax. Okay, so they both lose surplus. So both buyers and sellers lose surplus, right? They lose surplus for two reasons. They pay because they're paying the tax and because of the deadweight loss. So let's look at those two reasons. Okay. The second thing is our tax is paid by both sides, by both buyer and both the buyer and the seller. Okay, so remember this tax revenue of B and D. Well, we said above, the part B is coming from the buyer and part D is coming from the seller, and they're both getting hurt. The buyers are getting paying a higher price, and the sellers are receiving lower amount. And then the final thing, so that's part of the loss of surplus for the buyers and sellers, but that's not deadweight loss. That's just a transfer from the buyers and sellers to the government. But the third thing is where the deadweight loss. The deadweight loss is caused by this quantity with the tax to be less than the equilibrium quantity. Okay, and so some units have a benefit to the buyer greater than a cost to the seller, but they're not produced, right? So then no one benefits from them. So then this is what we call deadweight loss. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. Just to summarize the three things again, that's the reason why very few people are very happy with taxes, especially taxes on purchases, is that it hurts both the buyers and the sellers, right? So both sides are unhappy. And it's paid by both sides. So when you hear, oh, they're putting this tax and we shouldn't worry about it, well, no, when you hear about a tax on a good, you should say, well, if I buy that tax is going to affect. If I buy that good, that tax will affect me. It doesn't matter whether it's being put on me or being put on the company. Either way, they're going to be able to. The company will be able to pass part of the cost onto the customer, right? And they will also likely absorb some of the cost themselves. And then the third thing is the deadweight loss is caused by this reduction in quantity. So the bigger the reduction in quantity, the bigger the deadweight loss will get in general. Okay, hopefully that's clear. In the next video, we're going to talk about how elasticity affects who the tax falls on to.